What's up, y'all? It's your girl Sierra Simone, and welcome back to the Women's Vault. So, before we get started today, I just want to say thank you so much to anyone who has liked, commented, shared any of the reels, the TikToks, the YouTube shorts, anything that I posted. About the Women's Vault, I just want to say thank you for your support in advance because you guys don't even know for real what I'm going to be talking about on here. And the fact that you guys did all of that for me, it really warms my heart. And I hope that you guys continue to support me. And I love you guys. But let's get into it. So, today's episode is going to be called Feel It to Heal It. Why, might you ask? Because we're going to talk about how to acknowledge as well as how to accept pain in our lives. Something that's super important to me is being able to share my story with other individuals, especially other women, because I feel like if someone else can learn from my mistakes, or if someone else can learn from a process that I've gone through myself that has turned out to be successful, I feel satisfied in knowing that I was able to assist somebody else along their journeys, because a lot of this stuff I had to learn myself. Like I said in the previous episode, have I had people to look up to, but a lot of these things surrounding what will be talked about in this podcast, a lot of it I do feel like I figured out myself alongside with the Lord. So before we get started, I'm just going to touch back on a little short part of a story that I gave y'all last episode where I was talking about daddy issues, right? And so this is why accepting and acknowledging pain is so important, because all of those years I went without acknowledging how much my dad kind of not being there hurt me. All of those years, that pain just kind of sat there. And instead of it being something that I healed through, it started to transpire into part of who I was. And that could be dangerous because your pain is never supposed to be a part of who you are. It's supposed to help you get from one point in your life, and you're supposed to grow and learn from it to develop a healthier version of you. When you allow that pain to sit inside and you never deal with it, that pain and that hurt, which can be a very negative thing, becomes part of who you are. And so that's why a lot of people walk around so bitter. They walk around so hurt because they've never dealt with that pain. And that pain became who they were. They walk around scorned. And me, I personally don't like walking around pissed off all the time. I don't want to walk around upset all the time. I know if you know me personally, you know I get irritated. I get irritated very easily. But to say that I'm an angry person or I walk around just pissed off all the time, I don't feel like anybody can say that unless I'm in a situation that I was meant to walk away from a long time ago. And that's just for anybody. But we'll get into that another day. So before we begin getting too deep into it, we're going to talk about what pain looks like. There can be emotional pain, like, somebody says something to me and they hurt my feelings. And so I might move on in life if I hadn't attended to that pain. I might move on being emotionally soft. I might move on being emotionally hardened. For each person, it looks different. A lot of people think it's a personality trait, but sometimes it's just unresolved hurt, like we stated before. Emotional pain, I feel like, hits people the deepest because a lot of people move based off of their emotions, which you shouldn't necessarily do, but a lot of people do. And so, in doing that, if you hurt somebody's feelings emotionally, and they already don't know or don't understand how to process that, it turns into something super, super crazy. Some people get a little delusional. Some people start to get really selfish. Some people get into this very independent mindset when we weren't created to be so independent to where we don't lean on our fellow brothers and sisters. There's physical pain, trigger warning. There is I won't even say it because at this point I don't even know the rules to YouTube just yet. So we just gonna say SA. But I think TikTok has me triggered because you can't say certain stuff because they ban you. But anywho, um, you have physical abuse. I've been through a little bit of all of that. And if you don't deal with it, you also become closed off. Any type of pain, because I'm not going to keep repeating myself, any type of pain that you experience could ultimately result in you closing off who you are to the world. It could make you want to hide. You might feel like you're not understood. It could just result to a whole bunch of negative things that could have been avoided if people knew how to properly acknowledge and accept their pain and understand that pain is part of your life. It's bound to happen. The Bible says, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. However, it never says that those weapons weren't going to form. Like, so it's bound to happen. So it's something that we as humans need to learn how to manage and work through in a positive light. There's also spiritual pain. A lot of people get church hurt. A lot of people get hurt by the people in spiritual spaces that are supposed to be a leader to them, or they get hurt by the congregation, or even if they're not in a church, they might get hurt by something someone says online, or even just some of the morals and values of different religions or spiritual practices will emotionally hurt people. Will hurt people. So there's all different types of hurt that you can experience, but no matter what that hurt looks like, I personally feel like, now I'm not a professional, but I personally feel like the steps to getting through it looks the same. It might not look the same specifically for every person, but the grieving process, acknowledging, first step, you have to acknowledge that there is a problem. You have to acknowledge that there's pain, right? So it's really inevitable, you know? You have to go through pain in order to grow. Diamonds, they're put under pressure before they come out looking all beautiful and shit. So, our steps in acknowledging and accepting pain is first, you have to just pause and be present. That is probably the hardest thing to do, honestly, because the culture we live in today glorifies staying busy, grinding, even just outside of the culture, the economy requires it because it's getting crazy out here, for real. That itself requires it, like, just to maintain your home. So sometimes it's hard for people to sit still and just be present. You have to be very intentional with this step. Just take time, whether it's you going on a walk outside, turning your phone on silent, just taking a walk, just sitting with yourself and your thought. Go find a big old rock to sit on. Go to the park, or even if it's you running a bath and you're just sitting in the bath. What I do for myself, me sitting and being present, for me, at my big old age of almost 28, when I am going through something and I need to sit and be present, I legit ride in the car with no music on. And sometimes it's gotten to the point now to where I don't even recognize that I'm doing it. Until I've reached my destination. I'm just driving like for 30 minutes. And then I finally get to my destination and I'm just sitting there like, that was a good talk, Sierra. Like, I haven't said nothing. I'm just sitting with myself and my thoughts. Now, it's a little bit harder to do with my son in the car because he's asking me 30 million questions. But hey, it's what it is. But yeah, you just have to sit and be present with yourself. You have to take that time, whatever that looks like for you. So this takes for you to have even just a little bit of understanding about yourself. So yeah, sit and be present. Just take a second to pause, no matter what that might look like for you. Take a second. And if you don't know what that looks like for you, write a list of different things that you can do. Try them all. Try them all. And if one thing don't work, scratch it off. Go to something else. If that doesn't work, scratch it off. But it's experimental until you find something that works good for you, that you feel good about, that nobody on this earth could tell you otherwise about. Continue to try different stuff until you figure that part out. So once you're able to sit, pause, and be present, you're going to want to identify the source of your pain. Now, this one could be a little bit more difficult for a lot of people. For me, identifying the source took therapy, right? And I do want to say this, especially in the African American community, therapy is looked down upon. I'm so happy that I would say within the last 5 to 10 years, therapy has become a larger topic of conversation and it's become more acceptable within our community. I was in therapy for a year, and if it wasn't for Miss Kadosh leaving to go to another practice that was outside of my provider network, I would have still been with her till this day. I did attempt to find another therapist after, but just I was shopping around and it wasn't working. I think I was comparing everybody to Miss Kadosh, but hey, that it is what it is. But identifying the source. If you don't have the insurance or you don't have the funds to be able to do so, what I would suggest that also works is to write out a lot of the major events that has happened in your life that you can still vividly remember till this day. Or also writing out some things that you might not be able to vividly remember, because sometimes if we go through something traumatic enough, our body will black out, our mind will black out, or it'll be just a tad bit harder to remember some of the specific details of that said event. But recognizing the source could be an event that took place. It could be a relationship. It could be a person that has triggered you just with being who they are. So for me, I would say when I identified the source of my pain originally, when it came down to my pappy issues, there was a period of time after abusive ex. I almost said that man's name. Lord Jesus, help me. Not trying to throw anybody under the bus, just feeling my truth. But yeah, after abusive ex, I would definitely say there was a point in time where I had to be present. I did get into an activity that I fell in love with. I used to be a pole dancer. Disclaimer, I was not a stripper. I was not a stripper, but I got involved with pole dancing. I fell in love with it. I began teaching beginner level pole dancing classes. It was something that helped clear my mind. I was around other women who had gone through things, who were working on their confidence, all of that good stuff. Loved it. And so there was a point in time where I would say that I didn't identify my source until I would say a few months into me doing pole. It took for me to clear my mind a little bit. It took for me to start to feel a little bit better about myself before I could really dive deep into what I had experienced and what were some of the things that might have caused me to make certain decisions in that relationship, to even have to be at that point of experiencing those things. And so, yeah, I just had to sit and think. I was just thinking about my life. I was just like, Sierra, how did you end up here? How did you end up moving back with your mom? Sierra, how did you get here? Things were going so well. You graduated high school. You went college. You on the step team. You were part of QSS. Like, you doing big things your freshman year, like you making friends, like you a part of different teams, like how did you get here? And so I was just thinking about my childhood. I did not have a bad childhood. I was not raised in the hood. I like to call myself a cul-de-sac kid. I was raised in the suburbs. When my parents moved us down here, they wanted a better life for us. Yeah, I was not ever living in the ghetto for real. So it's like, how did I get here? At what point did things start to change? And that's when I started to realize, at this point, I was also having some feelings towards my dad as well, because I don't think I said this in the last video, but my ex hit me. We had been broken up, just quick story. We had been broken up for about a month or so, and I was coming back from Alabama. Um, he kept begging me to talk. And I finally gave in. I said, okay, I'll meet you at Lennox. Like, we can meet in a public place, talk for a little bit before I get home. Mind you, I'm driving back from Alabama. So I just got done with a 4-hour drive. He's like, let's talk. I'm like, okay, whatever. So we're talking. And once again, he asked me a question that he did not want to know the answer to. And so one thing led to another. And he ended up hitting me in my face, like punching me in my face. So I had a black eye, right? And I won't give too many details, but ended up back at his place. I was kind of discombobulated because he kind of hit me from a very close range. I ain't even gonna cap. Like, it's not funny. Let me just say that. Healed from it. I've moved on. And he really got the worst of it because my dad and brother really did their big one on him. Yeah. And that's all I'm gonna say. Can't go messing with people's children. That's all I'm gonna say. Can't go messing with people's children. But yeah, so before that happened, my dad and we were not hardly speaking. My dad did meet this man, and he did tell me to watch out for him. He did tell me that something seemed off, like he didn't really, trust him, but he would give him a chance. But before my dad met him, for real, my dad and I had not been talking like that for years. Like, we would talk, but it wasn't on a consistent basis. It would be like weeks or like a month will go by and I wouldn't hear from my dad. And so with me fast forwarding, with me sitting with myself and just looking at this entire situation with my ex, I'm like, well, how did we get here? And I'm like, okay, like I did this, like I should have walked away at this point, and I was starting to think about the things that happened that day that, my dad and brother came to the rescue. And I started to think like after that, my dad really started like reaching out to me. Like for real. My dad started reaching out to me more. I had heard from him more in that short few months than I had heard from him in really the last few years prior to that, honestly. And that moment when I thought about that is at the point to when that was the point that I realized, Sierra, you got some daddy issues. And that's when I kind of started to dive deep into, why I make some of the decisions I make. Not to say by any means, I'm not saying that my dad is to blame for who I am, excuse me, for who I was. But I had to recognize that hurt that I felt from that situation played a part in why I made certain decisions that I was making as a young woman. We're going to go ahead and move on. So the third point is you have to allow yourself to feel. It hurt me to the core, like, dang, you really got daddy issues. My cousin will always make jokes about women with daddy issues. My cousin will always make jokes about women with daddy issues and stuff. And it's like, dang, I'm that girl. I am that girl that might have been a little bit too easy to access because my dad was not as there as much as I needed him to be. I'm that girl who, was willing to just accept whatever for the sake of just having someone. Because the man that was supposed to love me first and foremost didn't love me in the way in which he should have, you know? So I had to allow myself to feel that pain because I had suppressed it for years and it hurt. And I can't lie, I felt some type of way towards my dad for a very long time. Um, yeah, I will say it. When did this happen? This happened in 2017, 2018. Yeah, this happened June 18th of 2018 is when my dad stepped up and did his big one. Months after that is when I started to feel it and feel all of it. And I just kind of started to really have a dislike for my father. I mean, I did before, but I think that during this time it kind of grew more and it started to grow an irritation towards him. Um, and I would say maybe last year is when I really started to change my perspective. And that's point number 4 is reframing your perspective about it. Now, mind you, that's a long time. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't hate my dad. Love my father. I really do. I love my dad. And I did my best to not allow those internal feelings that I had towards him. I did my best to not project it onto him or to externally show those things because if you look at it, it's a little awkward. Okay, I did this all of these years ago, right? I did this all of these years ago. I left all of these years ago. And now all of a sudden, all these years later, you randomly being pissed off at me now, all because you recognize where this hurt is stemming from and you're finally feeling it. Like, so I didn't want to, I tried my best. I don't know how it came out, but I tried my best to not externally project onto him what I was currently going through from a previous season in my life. And so, yeah, I would say within this last year or two is when I started to reframe my perspective. I think this is the hardest part for people because it's so easy to sit in step 3 of allowing yourself to feel that you forget that it's another part to that step. And so, in that next step, when you reframe your perspective, you have to acknowledge the other side. And for a lot of people, that's hard because a lot of people lack empathy. A lot of people are not able to take people off of a pedestal. A lot of people, if we're going to be honest, a lot of people that experience true internal hurt, a lot of people idolize the people that hurt them in some type of way. And the idolization of that person was off rip the number one issue. And I could say I was a daddy's girl. So even though when I was younger, I didn't understand just how bad it hurt me, like recognizing it later on and I'm feeling that pain, I was pissed off. There were other issues in the family going on as well. I was trying my best to be like understanding of all parties and all sides, but it just got to the point to where my father started just pissing me the F off. And it was kind of hard because it was kind of hard for me to reframe my perspective because it's easy to feel like when you're looking at things from the other side, it's easy to feel like that you're making excuses for them. But that's not what it is. It's more so of you just, hey, it wasn't right. However, I could understand why this might have happened. I could understand why at that time you might have felt like that was okay. I might not agree with it. We're going to have to agree to disagree. I might not agree with it, but it is what it is. Because in order for you to fully heal and let things go, you got to kind of look at it from both sides. And that's something that I feel like now I do a very good job of is I always like to look at it from both perspectives because everyone's perspective is different, especially when you're dealing with a man versus a woman. We just naturally think differently. And that's just, God created us differently. We have different roles. We have different parts on this planet that we play. Let's just be real. So it's like, it's hard, especially when you're not a man. It's hard to look at the perspective of a man. But like, what I do is I look at the situation that was at hand. And I know at the time I didn't have all of the information, but I could look at what I did have. I could look at, the things that I did see and experience. I could look at the things that he did do. I could look at the things that I did know. And I could also look at the person that he was with. One thing I fully believe in is not bashing the other parent to your children, because they will grow up they will grow up and figure out exactly who that person is. Wholeheartedly believe it. That's why I don't like to bash my child's father, because at the end of the day, my child is going to grow up and he's going to realize who I am as a person, and he's going to realize who his father is as a person, and he'll be able to do with that what he pleases. And I had a moment where I came to realize just who my mom was and just who my father was. And so, with knowing that information and having a better understanding of that, I could understand. I could understand both sides of my parents' separation. I can understand my mom's side, and I can also understand my father's side. And it is what it is. But, hey, back to reframing perspective. So, anyways, I say all of that to say, there is a lot to look at when it comes to reframing your perspective. I'm going to go back to this pedestal comment that I made earlier. It was hard for me to reframe my perspective, and it's hard for a lot of children to reframe their perspective of their parents, because we have them on such a high pedestal. But what we need to realize as children, and what I came to realize when I became a parent, is parents are human too. Parents are too. Like, parents are no less human than they are after the child than they were before. And it's hard to realize that, because you grow up for 18 years, and this is your legal guardian. This is the person making decisions over you. This is your sole caretaker. This is the person caring for you, making sure you have food and clothes and you in the activities, and they telling you what you can and can't do, if you can go to the party, or when you can drive the car, and all this stuff. So it's hard once you're of age to live your own life and do what the hell you want to do. It's hard to take them off of that pedestal, because we forget that they're human too, because of the heavy role that they've played in our lives. And so that was hard for me to acknowledge for a very long time, is that they're human too. And I believe it was something that, I believe it was Oprah Winfrey said, if I'm not mistaken. But I saw something a while ago online, and basically she was saying that she had to forgive her mom because she realized that her mom gave her all she had to give. And sometimes with our parents, we tend to, or just not even parents, but I'm going to use parents as an example, but a lot of times with our parents, we expect this out of them. And sometimes they only have this much to give. And so that's where putting them on that pedestal comes in at. No. Did we ask to be here? No. Did they decide to have children? Yes. Did they know that there were things that they were going to have to step up to and do? Yes. But at the same time, we have to allow people grace, right? And so that's where the fifth step comes in at. And this step is honestly going to be the hardest step, for a lot of people, because this step is easier said than done. But forgiveness. And there are two separate parts to forgiveness. One step is you have to forgive the person that hurt you. And this step, you don't always have to let the person know that you've forgiven them. And that's the gem here. That's something that I've learned to do. I forgive people in silence. There doesn't always have to be a conversation of closure. There doesn't always have to be that last hurrah, like I need to get this off my chest. Sometimes getting it off your chest is writing a letter. Sometimes getting it off your chest is talking to yourself in the mirror, saying what you would want to say to them in their face, but you're saying it to yourself in the mirror. You know, it doesn't always require for them to know that you've forgiven them, because sometimes people hurt you just so bad to where you don't even feel safe being around them or communicating with them. Or it could backfire on you. You try to go in there, you try to go and talk to them, and they're just going to end up basically spitting in your face. It's going to be like a slap in the face because they're still going to do the manipulative things to you that hurt you in the first place. So I found that forgiving people in silence helps. So, like for me with my abusive ex, but I don't recall ever having a conversation with him, letting him know that I've forgiven him for all the hurt that he caused me. And that was some deep rooted hurt. When I say I lost all sense of self worth, let me backtrack. I lost the little bit of self worth and confidence that I had stepping into that relationship. I won't blame it all on him, but for the parts that he did do, I've forgiven him for it. And the reason why I said I won't blame it all on him is because I also have to forgive myself. And that's part two of forgiveness. A lot of people focus solely on the other person and what the other person did wrong to them. So yeah, a lot of people tend to forget like there's two sides of the story. I mean, really it's three sides, but it's two perspectives to every story. And there's two sides of forgiveness as well. You have to forgive the person that hurt you. You also have to forgive yourself for any role that you might have played in that hurt, for any guilt that you felt towards yourself. For instance, when my ex hit me, I was blaming myself for even going to talk to him. I was making it seem like I deserved to get hit because I was looking at it like, Sierra, this man has hurt you time after time after time. And you're still trying to give him grace. You're still trying to have this conversation of closure. You're still trying to do this and that. So you basically deserve to get punched upside your head. And that's the truth of it. That was the thought that was going through my mind. And I had to forgive myself for that. Because I had to tell myself, Sierra, even if I would have went back and talked to him a million times, I didn't deserve that. I had to forgive myself for the guilt that I felt for not leaving sooner. I had to forgive myself for the anger that I felt towards myself for any situation, for allowing myself or allowing a man to get me that low. So it's a lot of different parts of forgiveness that you have to look into. It's easier said and done than done. And because I've been working at it for years, it's so much more easier for me to forgive somebody now than it was then. It takes time. But what I will say is forgiveness is a choice. A lot of people tend to say that, hey, it's hard. I can't forgive them. You can forgive them. You're just choosing not to. Forgiveness is a choice. Forgiveness is you waking up and saying, I know this person hurt me, but I will no longer allow a person that's not even in my life anymore to disrupt my life this much. I will no longer allow this person to control my emotions and how I feel towards other people. I will no longer allow the situation to have me by my throat and disrupt the way I communicate with people. I will no longer allow this person to have control over how I treat individuals. That's what forgiveness is. It's I'm going to forgive this person because it's what's best for me. And also, if you want to take it to a spiritual aspect, if you want to talk about Jesus, this is how I look at it. God sent his only son down here to live his life, to show us how to live holy, to be an example of what life on this earth should be like. But he also sent him as a sacrifice to die for our sins. And regardless of what that person's relationship with Christ looks like, Jesus died for their sins too. And who am I to hold a grudge over someone who their sins have already been paid for by the blood? Just as much as mine. Not less, not more, just the same. Jesus died on that cross for him and for me. I don't care who was wrong in the situation. So that's how I look at it now. But when I'm speaking to people who are not in that space, I explain it how I explained it before. Because no matter how you look at it, it makes sense. If you want to look at it from a spiritual sense, it makes sense. If you want to look at it from a non-spiritual sense, it makes freaking sense. Because if you're not talking to this person, if this person is off living their best life, out hurting the next person, maybe, or even if they're not, they're living their best life, they're doing them, going on trips, partying, having fun, all while you're over here hurt. You're over here blocking your blessings. You're over here blocking that person that's trying to love you. You're over here losing friends because you're so depressed. You're over here just washed up in a whole bunch of hurt. When you can choose to forgive that person, you can choose to relinquish that chokehold that that person has over your life. And it's hard, but with time and with effort, it can be done. I could see my ex today. I could see abusive ex today, truthfully. And I would treat him with just as much love and kindness as I would the next person. Why? Because I've forgiven him. Now, I will say this. Just because you've forgiven somebody does not mean that you have to allow them access to your life. Even Jesus had boundaries. So it's like, yes, you can forgive them. If you see them, you can say, hey, you can still be kind. You can still be loving. But that doesn't mean that you have to exchange numbers and go out to eat with them. That don't mean that you got to have them at the house or act like ain't nothing ever changed. Like, ain't no time go in between y'all and ain't nothing changed. And it's just like, yeah, let's be best friends. Like, no. You can forgive somebody and still have boundaries. There's been times where abusive ex has hit me up. Yeah. After my dad and brother handled, after they did that big one, still hit me up. Years later, I might add. I have boundaries. How may I help you? I'm blessed. Thank you. Have a great day. I don't have to cuss him out. I don't have to, be rude. I can be short with him. I can respond. Some people might even say just block. Cool. But baby, let me tell you something. I want the Lord to prepare a table in front of all of my enemies. So I stopped blocking people. You hurt me? Baby, I want you to see the overflow of blessings that the Lord has for me. I want you to see it. So, hey, come look. It's okay. You want to follow? Follow me. That don't mean I'm going to follow you back. Boundaries, right? So, yeah, it's all about balance. I will say I'm big on balance. Big, big, big on balance. I believe that Jesus I believe that Jesus showed he was a great example of what having boundaries. Excuse me. I believe that Jesus was a great example of what balance looked like, and that is something that I work towards every day. Is just being a very balanced individual. Don't want to go too far over here. Don't want to go too far over there. Balance. I can forgive you. I can be kind to you, but I don't have to let you in my home. I can be kind to you. I can be loving, but I don't have to be buddy buddy with you. If you was on the side of the road, I can give you $20, but that don't mean I have to let you hop in my car and be all up in my personal vicinity. You know? So it's all about balance. All about balance. And so yeah, forgiveness is I could go on about forgiveness for days. But forgiveness is huge. And just to backtrack to how that has impacted with my daddy issues, I had to forgive my dad. And I think forgiving my dad, honestly, I'm going to just be real, forgiving both of my parents for their shortcomings, I would say was harder for me than it was to forgive abusive ex. Because abusive ex was only like a year and some change of her. My parents, that's all my life. And like I said, they're not bad parents. They're not. But I truly believe that no matter how good of a parent you try to be, you will hurt your children in some sort of way. I know that there is going to be a way that I will hurt my child and he gonna come and sit me down one day and tell me all the ways in which I hurt him. So, it's bound to happen. Your children are not exactly like you. They're their own little people, developing their own little minds. And just because you think a certain way or feel a certain way doesn't mean your child will. And so it's just bound to happen. And so it was very hard for me to forgive my parents. But I think one thing that really helped me a lot was to accept them for who they are. I had to look at both of my parents and really look at who they are as people. And I had to accept them for who they are, not even as my parents, but as human beings. I had to accept them as human beings. And once I was able to do that, I felt like things kind of started being a lot more light for me. I didn't feel like I had so much weight on my shoulders. There are still some things that I'm working through, but I don't feel all of that weight anymore because it's like, okay, this is who they are. I can't expect any more or any less from them. This is who they are. Just how I expect people to accept me for who I am. Yeah. Now, is there always room for growth? Yeah. But if they woke up today and decided they didn't want to grow no more and this is who they are, this is how they're going to be, I have to accept that. Whether I decide to stay in their lives or not, I've accepted who they are. And that has helped me to forgive them for the things that has happened in the past that had affected me from when I was a child into when I was growing into a young woman. And so, not saying I'm gonna walk out of my parents' lives, but I'm just saying, like, I know some people do. Some people accept their parents for who they are and they decide that they don't want nothing to do with them. That's your business. But, forgiveness, like I said before, whether they know they're forgiven or not, is a crucial step in this process of healing. It just is. Because without forgiving, can you truly say that you healed? I don't believe so. And like I said, I'm not a professional. But what do I know? And step 6 is you have to take active steps towards healing. It just is what it is. And so, yeah, some of those things might include journaling. Some of those things might include therapy. But one of the biggest things that will include is patience. You have to be patient with yourself. You have to be patient with yourself because if you try to rush it, you might not really get the chance to really dive into how you feel. You might miss out on a revelation. You might miss out on, different ideas or like even in my healing journey, I would say that this podcast stemmed from me being patient with myself. This podcast this podcast came to me about a year into my self-love journey. You know, my active steps towards healing was May of 22. I began my self-love journey. Like I said, I started forcing myself to wear heels, started dressing up when I was going out, got into church, all of that. Like those were my active steps towards healing. On once I did those Once I did those physical things, on the inside, I started to feel better. And then I was actively able to start working on my inner healing. So it looks different for everybody, but you literally have to just figure out what works best for you. Do what makes you feel good. And not just feel good momentarily, but it needs to be something that is progressively making you feel good day in and day out, which is producing positive outcomes in the long run, not just something that makes you feel good in the moment, like sex. No, that's not what we're talking about here. Not even a little bit, babe. So, and trust me, I've done it, so I know. I attempted to do the thing that made me feel good in the moment. Didn't work. And that's just me being honest. And so you have to be present in the moment, but also making sure that while you're being present in the moment, these things are going to give you positive outcomes in the long run. Because I could have effed around and found out for real. I could have had two little babies. Not saying I got pregnant twice or anything, but like if I would have kept playing like that, you never know. You never know. But yeah, guys, I hope that some of you guys took something away from this, and because I feel like this is the hardest part. I'd say this is the second hardest part because what we're going to talk about in the next episode, I think, is the hardest part of the healing journey. Maybe it's just the hardest part to me because I've always kind of been like in tune with my emotions. But for people who are not emotionally mature or who are not in tune with their emotions at all, this might just be the hardest step in this healing process. But I promise you, it might just be the most transformational aspect of it, because you start to feel like a completely different person. You start to look like a completely different person. You're not gonna walk around angry all the time, baby. You get them emotions together, ain't nobody gonna be able to tell you shit. Okay, so start setting up those boundaries. Let me not dive too deep into what we're talking about next week, but before we close out today, I just want to give you guys some reflection questions. So number one, what part of my pain am I avoiding and or denying? So what part of yourself are you pushing deeper down in your heart? What part of you is making you so closed off to other people? What part of you is making you so hard to love? What part of you is making you an obsessive lover? Because that stems from pain too, but we're going to clock that T another day. What lesson can I learn from this? Right? So, yeah, I've been hurt, but what can I learn from this? How can this situation be beneficial towards me? Example, with abusive ex. How was it beneficial to me? I learned that I needed to create boundaries and standards, not only for myself, but for other people, right? It's always something positive that comes out of every situation. And last but not least, number 3, how can I forgive myself? And I specifically wrote this question down because it's easier to forgive other people than it is to forgive ourselves. We're our biggest critics. We're the hardest on ourselves. And sometimes we beat ourselves up so much that we're putting ourselves into another hole. So how can I forgive myself? How can I love on myself? Right? So think about that. And before we close out, I have to do it. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and share. Go to the Woman Vaults podcast on Instagram, hit that follow button, share one of our posts, send the profile to some friends. And again, thank you so, so, so much for all that you do. Thank you for supporting me and my vision. And I will see you guys next time.